Okay, hello. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another installment of the Digital Marketing Playbook for Vision and Hearing Care Practices. So, today we're going to talk about why your website content does nothing. I guess I should unpack what that statement means a little bit before we go any further. So, when I say content, I guess what I'm talking about here mostly is website blog content, like blog articles, that kind of thing. Um, so what I see in my agency when we take on a new client is if I look at the Google Analytics for their website. Well, firstly, in a lot of cases, they haven't even started to create articles. They haven't started to create any kind of educational content, which is a mistake, and I'll unpack that in a minute. But if they do have a blog archive and they've started to create some kind of content, then I can see from the analytics that it really hasn't got much traction. Not many people have been to that page. Google probably hasn't ranked it very well. So for all intents and purposes, that bit of content's invisible. So what typically happens is new practice owners, they launch a website. Somebody tells them, oh, you should have a blog. So they start to write a few articles. They don't see any benefits from it, and they're pretty soon they give up. So it's not uncommon for me to look at websites where there's a blog archive and the most recent article was published, August 2022 or something like that. So it's clear what's happened there. So why would you even bother to create content in the first place? Well, so for a number of reasons. So one is to get visibility through algorithms. So visibility through Google. That's always been like the main game, I guess. So if you create content that Google thinks is worthy of it, then it will show that to people who are searching for particular things. That's free traffic to your website, right? So everyone likes free. Certainly you'd rather get long-term traffic to your business, which leads then to more patient bookings and so on. It's a lot better if you can do that for free without paying for ads, right? So that's the motivation there. And in recent times, it's not just Google, of course, but it's other AI platforms like ChatGPT and Perplexity and Gemini and others. So we have some clients who actually track how their patients heard about them by asking when they visit the clinic, and I can see the results there that every month there are more and more people saying that they found a particular clinic through an AI platform. So that's the reason why you would want to create content, basically, is to get visibility online. But as I said, a lot of that content, sadly, seems to be doing nothing. So we're going to talk about that, why that happens, and what you can do about it today. So the key points that we're going to cover is why helpful content still gets ignored by algorithms, as I explained. We'll discuss why your website visitors pogo stick or bounce away. So pogo sticking is actually a term that's used in the SEO industry to describe the scenario where somebody does a search, they click on a link that takes them to your website, and they don't engage, they bounce right away. They hit the back button. Okay. Google can see all of that. And that's a really bad sign for them. And it means they're probably going to rank your site lower or suggest it less in the Google AI overviews, which we have now, because their whole business model is about providing people with a good user experience and answering the questions that they may have. So if your website visitors are pogo sticking, then that's a sign that something about your content that needs to be fixed. So we're going to talk about why great content still needs distribution. So some of you might remember the 1980s movie with Kevin Costner, The Field of Dreams. The famous line where he says, "If we build it, they will come." And I think most website owners operate on that principle. They believe that by putting up a blog post, then they're going to get a gold rush of potential patients visiting them. That can happen, but it's certainly you certainly increase your chances of success if you have some kind of a distribution strategy to actually get the word out about that content, get more eyeballs on your blog articles. And lastly, we're going to talk about how to plan a content strategy. So rather than just throwing spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks, it's always better if you have some kind of a purposeful roadmap for what you're doing. Okay. So I should have said before we started. So if you're getting this clearly, can you type a 1, hit a 1, tap 1 in the comments, so I can just get some confidence that that this is going out and you're getting the stream correctly. Also, before we go any further, let me do the usual bold assumptions here. I'm assuming that you're watching this live stream because you are the owner or manager, or planning to become the owner or manager of an optometry practice, an audiology practice, or an ophthalmology practice. You might be, you might be in some other related healthcare profession. That's fine, but those three industry segments are who my agency typically works with. Also, assuming that you're here because you have an interest in actually growing your practice. Okay. And just to give you a heads up that if any of the ideas that I talk about today resonate with where you're at in your business right now, then you can book a free one-on-one Zoom call with me, and I'm happy to have a chat with you about any questions you may have, and you can do that through my agency's website at opticsdigital.net. And who am I? Well, so my name's Paul Salloway. I've been in digital marketing since 2008. And a few years ago, I created Optics Digital Marketing as an agency that specifically works with eye care professionals. And in recent years, I've expanded that to include hearing care professionals as well. So we typically work, as I said, with optometrists, ophthalmologists, and audiologists. So we have growth plans for clients at any stage of their business, right? Whether that be a clinic that's looking to get patients through running ad campaigns, Google ads, Facebook ads, or if you're just in the early stages and you want to get your foundations right. We have a foundations plan where we make sure that your booking process is free of friction, and where you're building authority online through content. That's largely that's what we're talking about today. So that's part of what we do. As I said, we have plans for clinics at every stage of their business evolution. All right, so why does helpful content get ignored by algorithms? Well, one reason is that a lot of content that gets put out there is saying pretty much the same thing as every other article. There's nothing original in it. It's just regurgitation. So this is something that that AI is particularly bad at. So if you're relying on ChatGPT to write your blog content for you, ChatGPT is just a regurgitation machine. It just takes what everyone else has written and repackages it. So if there's nothing original in there, then Google's probably not going to rank you, very highly. And AI platforms themselves are probably not going to pay much attention either. I think probably the biggest reason why I see content getting ignored is because of what they call thin content. So when I say thin content, I mean like these articles that are only like, I don't know, maybe 500 words long, something like that. I think there is a certain threshold that you have to hit before Google really regards what you've created as authoritative. So I think it's really hard to answer any query or like address any particular topic in a comprehensive way in just 500 words, or 600 words. So I think that if you're creating content and if you want to do a proper job of it, and not just provide a superficial answer to a query, then you should be aiming for somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 words, I believe. I think that's kind of the sweet spot. I think anything more than 1,500, it's maybe drags on a bit, which might be good for algorithms, but probably not for humans. I think it's better if you get to the point a bit faster than that, and 1,000 to 1,500 words is probably the sweet spot. That's what we aim for typically. And I can see this when I look at a website's Google Search Console, GSC Google Search Console. So I can see from that often there's a section in your Google Search Console. It's in the left side menu. There's an option under Pages, and it'll show you under that parts of your website where it says Google has crawled but not indexed. Okay, so that means that their bots, their crawlers, they've gone to your page, they've looked at it, and in a polite way, this is Google saying thanks but no thanks. So they've looked at your content and said, yeah, it doesn't really provide any anything that we don't already have. So that's why some pages under there it'll say crawl but not indexed, and those are the pages that you really should prioritize at improving and fixing first. Google rewards expertise, specificity, and originality. Okay, so those are the three things to really focus on. Google's looking for, they've said explicitly that they reward content which shows EAT signals. So EAT, EEAT, and those stand for expertise, experience, authority, and trust. So if your content demonstrates these things, you're more likely to get a better ranking in the Google search results, which means, more traffic, more patients booking, that sort of thing. So try to include points of view. I think this is another mistake people often make, is that they think that they have to write in sort of like a bland, careful language. And I understand about ARPA and all those sorts of things, but I think if you're bringing some kind of original viewpoint to the table, you're more likely to get a better result because of it. You're more likely to get people, other people with other websites linking to you, which is really helpful. So I think if you bring these things into your content, if you demonstrate expertise and some kind of original viewpoint, that can be really helpful. And I mentioned specificity. So rather than talking about, like, let's say, contact lenses, what contact lenses do we recommend? Well, if you were to create a piece around that, then you might do okay. But if you were to create a blog article about, what contact lenses do we recommend for women going through menopause who might be suffering dry eye disease, okay, that's very specific, and you're also more likely to do well out of that because probably there isn't a lot of good content that's already addressing that. I think that you should try to leverage some of the assets that you've already got in your business. So some of the clients we work with, so any time they get a new patient come in, they get them to fill out kind of like an intake survey, and there'll be questions on there like about dry eye symptoms. That questionnaire, which sort of determines the extent to which somebody might be suffering from dry eyes. And I mean that they do that for clinical reasons. But there's a lot of like really good data in there, anonymized, of course. But I mean, you could extract from that like what is the average extent that people experience dry eye disease when they come into your website or come into your practice. And you can even break that down by like age categories, because people put in their birth date on the form. You can break that down by gender. There's all sorts of like really interesting analytical approaches that you could take to that data, and you would get rewarded for that through Google, through large language model platforms like ChatGPT and so on, because they, as I said, they're looking for originality and specificity. So unfortunately, a lot of the opportunity there, I think, is just being left on the table. People aren't really leveraging what they could be. When you're creating content, I think it always pays to make it sound like you are speaking. Like I think a good sniff test to do is when you write something, read it back and actually read it aloud and think to yourself, is this the way I would speak to a group of friends at a barbecue, right? So if it's not, then maybe you need to go back and rewrite it, because I think that certainly for a human experience, we nobody wants to read an academic paper, like unless you're an academic, or unless you're somebody who's elbow deep in the medical profession. But for the average layperson out there, they don't have the patience to wade through all of that. So write it like you'd be speaking to a group of friends at a barbecue. That's probably the best way I could put that. Another thing too is if you remember back to your high school English days, so in English grammar, there's something called passive voice, and there's something called the active voice, right? So with passive voice, the subject of the sentence is unclear, whereas in active voice, it's very clear who's doing what to who. So I'm not sure if I explained that correctly. So I'll give you a couple of examples here. Okay, just bear with me. So listen to these two sentences. Okay, so let's take an audiologist example here. So hearing loss is often left undiagnosed for years. That's a passive sentence, right? Now compare that to, we often see undiagnosed hearing loss in our patients. So second example, active sentence, it's clear who, who is we, the clinic, right? We often see undiagnosed hearing loss in our patients. Which of those two examples reads better? Which of them seems, like more like a human writing rather than a machine? It's the second one. It's the active sentence, okay? Active format. Give you another example, okay? So let's say passive sentence, right? Annual eye exams are recommended for all adults. That's passive. Compare that to active. We recommend annual eye exams for all adults, right? So you can see where I'm going with this. So it's always better to write in active I think it's called active voice rather than the passive voice. Update your old content. Okay, so so a lot of content. Well, Google rewards fresh content, and the actual the AI platforms even more so. There've been some studies on this. You're much more likely to get cited, much more likely to rank better if the content was created fairly recently. There is a recency bias in the type of articles that get cited, that get ranked well. So I think it always pays to go back and look at the old stuff that you've created, like maybe 2, 3 years ago, and ask yourself the question, could I update this? Are there any, like, for example, are there any recent clinical studies that have been done that I could mention in this, just to bring that up to date? So one of the things that the algorithms look at is the published date, but also if your article has a last updated date, that's also a really good signal. So yeah, if you're talking about a piece of work that was published years ago, and it's being ignored by algorithms, then I would say take another look at it and brush it up, republish it. So Google rewards content which has high engagement. So what do I mean by engagement? Well, engagement is people spending longer on the page, people scrolling on the page, maybe people interacting with some kind of a widget or something on the page, people staying on your site, maybe and going to another page on your website. So basically, they're not pogo sticking. They're staying around. They're staying on your website. This is what I mean by high engagement. Google likes that. Google rewards that. So that's something that you need to try to improve. And next we're going to talk about how you would do that. Okay. So so it's probably no breakthrough here, but walls of text kill engagement and retention, right? So nobody likes to online come to a page that's just like a solid block of text. You're wasting your time doing that. So structure matters. Okay, so if you're creating a post, break it up. So have a clear title, create some expectation about what people are going to learn when they read the thing. Use subtitles, use bullet points, use an FAQ section, typically at the end. Internal links. So if you know that you've got another blog article on your website that's related to this one, then by all means, include an internal link. That's really helpful from a search engine optimization perspective. And another thing is to include like a key takeaways bullet point list at the beginning of your article, or if you like a TLDR summary. TLDR stands for too long, didn't read. So people are famously impatient online, so they want to, rather than read a 1,500 word article, if you can give them just a short, sort of paragraph that sums up the essence of what the message is, then that can be really helpful, and it's really good for the algorithms as well, because they will often take whatever you've mentioned in that TLDR or in your key takeaways bullet points and mention that in the AI results, which is what you want. So I talked about engagement. So one of the ways that we can increase engagement on our pages is by adding quizzes. Okay. So my agency, Optics Digital Marketing, so we have some free quizzes which you can add to your website. So we have quizzes around dry eye disease, myopia, Ortho K, pediatric optometry, and we'll probably build on that list. But if that's something that you're interested in adding to your website, then reach out to me, send me a message, and I'll be happy to share that with you. Videos, right? So most people don't have a YouTube channel. I think we're getting to the point where it's going to be almost mandatory that every business, even small businesses, have some kind of a online video presence. Particularly in the world of AI content, there's so much AI slop out there that when you as a business owner are getting in front of the camera, I think it pays in the sense that people can see, who you are, your personality, your style, and so on, and certainly builds up the trust factors. So I highly recommend that everyone thinks about starting a YouTube channel. And one of the great things that you can do from that is take that video content which you produce and embed it on your website. Okay. But if you're not starting a YouTube channel, that's fine. Look at other channels. There's plenty of other video content that might be produced, by maybe a clinic in the UK or Canada or somewhere. Nothing wrong with using that on your website as well, if it really illustrates a particular point very well. Okay. There's no copyright issues with that. It's all part of YouTube's terms and conditions that anyone who publishes on the platform, they give their permission for other people to embed it and reuse it. Infographics. Okay. This is something that in my agency we've been doing a lot more of recently. Is creating infographics for our clients. So there are now tools available where you can take a blog post, maybe, and create an infographic from that content. You can embed that infographic on the page. People are often visual. They, rather than reading something, they can just look at a graphic and get the key information that they need from that. It's also very useful piece of content that you can republish through your social media. We'll talk about that in a minute. Calculators. All right. So people love these kind of like calculators and widgets. So I want to give you an example. Like one of the things that's been on my to-do list for a while is to create a hydration calculator. So with dry eye disease, one of the recommendations that eye care professionals often give is to drink more water. Okay, stay hydrated. But what does that mean exactly? Because the amount of water which a 110 kilogram adult male needs to drink is a lot different from a 60 kilogram young female. So things like your age, body weight, type of lifestyle you have, I guess, type of weather that you live in, all of these things are factors which could influence how much water you should be drinking. So one of the things which I'm hoping to do is actually create a calculator which you could embed into your website, and we're going to give this away to our clients as well. So with all the usual caveats associated with something like that, but I think that those sort of widgets, those sort of calculators are really helpful, and you're also likely to get people linking to that from other websites, which again is helpful. Comparison tables. This is something that's really simple to do. It might not be original data, but you're presenting that data in a way that other people aren't. So, if you're creating a comparison table, maybe like you're an optometrist and you're creating a comparison table of, let's say all the different brands of myopia control lenses on the market, like MyoSmart, Stellest, the newer ones that are coming out from Zeiss and so on. So creating a table which lists out all of these brands and includes your comments or recommendations about each one. So this is also helpful. It's formatting content in a new way, right? So you're likely to get rewarded for that. Make sure you include good imagery. Okay, so what I really don't like seeing is like these tiny little thumbnails of an image. It's like 100 pixels by 150 pixels or something. I'm not sure why people do that, but it just doesn't look good. So if you're going to use images on your page, make sure that they're a good size. Make sure that they're good quality, good pixel resolution, all of that. Ideally, they're original photographs that you've taken yourself internally. But if you can't do that, then at least use good quality stock photos. I'm not sure how I feel about AI generated images, although it's getting better and better, I have to admit. Um, but whatever you decide to use, just make sure that it's a good quality. Diagrams and illustrations, things that illustrate a particularly complex topic, like myopia, astigmatism, um, you know, any sort of diagram that clearly explains what something is. Put that on your webpage. That's also really helpful, and I think Google gives a boost for your content if you've got something like that on there. Every article should guide readers to the next step. So I think every article you write, at the end of it or even throughout it, there should be like a link or a button that says, if you want to talk about this issue with us, then go ahead and book an appointment today. Okay, so don't make people guess what they need to do if they want to get in contact with you, because that's kind of like the whole point, isn't it, of creating this content? It's to get bookings, to get patient bookings. So make that step easy. So remind the reader where you are, what your phone number is, give them a link that they can click on. And also I've talked in a previous one of these lives about why we recommend WordPress as a website platform, for various reasons. One of them is that I think WordPress is very good at showing related content. So it's very easy to include like a section at the bottom of your blog post which says these are related posts. So if somebody's been reading about myopia control, your related post section might have a thumbnail and a link to something about Ortho-K, right? Ortho-K for children. So give people the opportunity to consume more content. If they've already read the thing, then that shows that they're interested, that they have a an interest in learning more. Then give them a chance to do that. And even better than that is to have some kind of a lead magnet, right? A PDF lead magnet, something that people can download. Okay. And in doing so, you want to be able to get their email address, add that to your email marketing list so that you can keep that relationship going. You can follow it up, next week, maybe with some kind of another piece of content, another PDF, or simply keep in touch with them through your monthly newsletter. So PDF lead magnets, I think, great idea. Not enough people do them. I'm going to talk probably in a live fairly soon about why email marketing is something that everyone should be doing. We've seen great success with this with some clients. An ophthalmology client we work with who created a PDF guide on laser vision correction, and they've succeeded getting hundreds and hundreds of people who provided their email address because they wanted access to that. So yeah, always give people some more opportunities to stay engaged and learn more from you. So I mentioned before that great content needs distribution. So publishing the content is only the starting point. Most clinics, I think, don't have any sort of distribution plan in place. I think if you're going to spend the time to create a solid piece of content, a solid blog article, then then let people know about that through social media, right? Include links back to that article on your Facebook page. Newsletters, okay. So I just mentioned that everybody should have some sort of an email marketing strategy. One of the great things that you can do with newsletters is include links to your recent blog posts. Okay, if you've just published a really solid article about cataract surgery, for example, then why not mention that in your monthly newsletter? Recommend that people click on the link and go to check out that piece of content. Video, I've already talked about. So when you're making videos, you can use that as an opportunity to talk about a blog post that you've created, include a link in the video description. So so those two things should be supporting each other: your blog site, or your blog articles, and your video content. They should be supporting each other. Forums, okay, so like there are Facebook groups out there for particular things. So I'm a member of a Facebook group about scleral contact lenses, and sometimes I'll see people asking questions about scleral contact lenses. Like, for example, somebody might ask the question, what are the advantages of fenestrated scleral contacts? And that's an opportunity for me to drop a link in and say, hey, I can see that you would like to learn more about this. Here's a blog article which might be helpful. So I'm not being salesy, right? I'm not trying to promote anything directly. I'm just providing a helpful answer through the content that I've created. Generally, you can do this with Facebook groups. Okay, if you're overly promotional, people might boot you out. You might get shown the door by the group administrators. But generally, if you're helpful and and you respect that, if you respect the general vibe of the group, it's a good way of distributing your content. Same applies with things like Quora and Reddit. I think Reddit in particular, you have to be really careful about not being promotional. But I think if you build up some sort of trust in the subreddit groups, then it is okay to drop a link in if you do it in a way that's genuinely helpful, particularly if somebody's asked a question, if they're looking for answers around something and that you've got a blog article that addresses that question, then Reddit can be really good. Reddit often gets very prominent mention in Google search results, and it often gets quoted by ChatGPT and other platforms as well. So I want you to think of your website as kind of like the mothership, the content hub. So you should be doing all these things. So social media, newsletter, video, forums, but link it back to your website. At the end of the day, you want to get people back there. So content strategy. So it's all very well to be creating content, but it's kind of like misses the point if you're creating content that nobody is searching for, right? So you're creating an answer when there is no question. So there are tools available. This is what SEO professionals have available to them, which they can use to actually find out like what are the high volume search terms. Now you can do to some extent, you can do this yourself for free. There is something, what's it called, the alphabet soup method, I think, where if you go into your browser, go to Google, up in the I think you can do it in the Google search box itself, actually, and just start typing a question, and now Google will auto-complete that question for you. So, for example, if you started typing best treatment for, it'll start to auto-populate the rest of the question for you. So Google might say like best treatment for dry eyes, best treatment for astigmatism or something. That's always a good sign that a lot of people are searching for those things. Okay, so Google autocomplete is kind of like giving you a signal that this is what people are asking. So that's always a good starting point. Think one thing to understand about keyword research is that not all search terms, even if there are a lot of people searching for them, not all of those search terms are going to be winnable. So what I mean by that is, if you were to write an article about, like what is keratoconus, so you might do okay, but you got to remember that there are millions of people all over the world searching that, and sites which typically come up high in the rankings are like WebMD, Mayo, what is it, the Cleveland Clinic, Wikipedia, big sites like with heaps and heaps and heaps of content behind them, and authority. So it's really kind of hard to compete on some of those terms that are informational and they're not local. So I think what is a much better strategy is to try to create content that you are going to be competitive for in a local search area. So, for example, if you were to create a piece of content around like best place to or like myopia treatment in Geelong or something like that, okay, you're probably going to be quite competitive for that, because there wouldn't be a lot of competing articles around that search term. And no doubt there are people in Geelong looking for myopia solutions. So something like that, have some sort of a local search component to the keyword that you're trying to win. So look at what other content is currently ranking. Look at what's driving searches before you create content. Otherwise, you might be wasting your time. I've talked about AI. Now, there's no shame in using AI to help you craft the structure of a content piece. There's no shame in using AI to help you with your research, okay? Google themselves have more or less said that they don't care who creates the content as long as it provides a good user experience. And so this is why, even if you are using AI for these things, don't skip the human editing, okay? It's still got to have a human voice behind it. If you don't have a lot of experience with writing prompts, then AI tends to write in a certain way. I can often tell just by reading something that this was produced by ChatGPT. So anything that you do produce, you do have to proofread it, because AI hallucinates, as we know. And make sure that it's in a voice that sounds like it's coming from you, basically. And the last point I want to make here is consistency matters, okay? So don't just write a couple of articles. Don't just write 3 blog articles and then say, hey, job's done. Let's go home. I think to build authority online does mean that you need to stick at it. All right. So if you stop that process of creating content, what tends to happen is your Google will sort of like drop you in the rankings, because it feels to them as though maybe you're not as active, your business isn't as active as it once was, and they're sort of likely to give you less rewards if that's the case. So I think that what we've seen is that the best results come from having a consistent publishing schedule, whether that's like 3 blog posts a month or 4 blog posts a month, whatever, and just be consistent about it. If you do that, you're going to build up what they call topical authority. So we have a particular approach which we call the kitchen sink approach. So it means like throwing everything bar the kitchen sink at a particular topic. So address a particular topic from as many different angles as you can think of. Look at the Google has a section like people also ask, okay, and that's another really good way that you can learn what sort of content you should be creating. So if you've got 10 or 15 articles that all talk about let's say scleral lenses in a particular way, then at the end of that process, Google's going to probably look at you and say, these guys, they really know their stuff. They are an authority around scleral lenses. So we're going to give them a really good search result. We're going to rank them high for anything that they have to say about scleral lenses. So that's topical authority, and that's really valuable. That's something that if you can achieve, then you're doing well. Right. So my final thought on this, something to leave you with, is that content marketing is an essential pillar of building online authority for your brand. And if you aren't building that authority, then you're standing still. Okay. So if you've got a website, you should be creating content. You should have a blog section. You should be putting out articles on a consistent basis. If you're not, what are you really doing? I think if you're not doing that, then you don't have a digital marketing strategy, right? It means, you must be running ads, then you must be running Google ads or Facebook ads or something, because those are really the only two ways that you're going to get visitors to your website, is either you pay for it through ads, or you create online authority and get that traffic for free. All right, so I'm going to wrap up there. So if any of this information today has struck a chord with you, if you'd like to learn more, then reach out to me. You can do that through my agency's website, which is opticsdigital.net. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can send me an email, which is paul@opticsdigital.net, and I'd love to have a chat with you. All right. If anyone has any questions, now's the last chance. Pop them in the chat box. So if not, then I will catch up with you again next week. All right, let's wrap up then. Okay, so bye for now. Have a good day, everyone.